whatever. But in any case, this is a weird argument, to say the least, right? But let's get our minds wrapped around exactly where the conclusion is. The conclusion is what? Is where is it located? Yes, Amy?
In the middle, one must therefore either.
Yeah, where does it end?
So I think it's the whole sentence. You could truncate it
I think
before the definition.
I think it might end at that comma.
Yeah.
Because the definition seems to be like a premise that would explain Mather's definition. Yeah. Whoever this guy is who came out of nowhere. So, okay. Many people think that this guy is a Baroque painter. And the conclusion is saying, hey, either we have to abandon the opinion of this majority of commentators. So if you abandon that opinion, what do you think?
You disagree with him?
You disagree with him, which means what do you think?
Oh, that he's not an early practitioner of that style.
Not an early practitioner of that style. So not B. Right? So this is our conclusion. And we're saying not B. So you either have to say, hey, that guy's not Baroque, or what do you have to say? Or what do you have to do? You have to reject Mather's definition. And what is Mather's definition?
That Baroque has to include opulence, heroic sweep, and extravagance.
These random things.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so you either that or you reject this definition, which is that Baroque requires, let's just shorten it to display those things, right? So you have to reject this idea. So either you think this guy is not Baroque, or you reject the idea that B requires D. Mm-hmm. If you don't do this, if you don't reject, if you don't, I don't want to get confused. If you don't abandon the opinion of the majority of commentators, in other words, if you don't think this painter is not Baroque, what must you think?
D doesn't require D? Or that Baroque doesn't have to have those three things?
Yeah, you must think that he is a Baroque painter.
Yeah.
And therefore that this claim right here is not true.
Yeah.
Right? So there's only two options here. Either you're going to say, this guy is not a Baroque painter, or you're going to say, yeah, he is a Baroque painter, but this cannot be true. And if you're going to think that he's a Baroque painter and this is not true, what must you think about his paintings?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, this argument is like, the definition was given to us in the premises, but let's say B leads to D. That was this Mather claim, right? All I'm saying is I'm focusing in on the conclusion because this question, what type of question is this?
Sufficient.
Sufficient assumption, and we know that because if, right? It says if assume. So our goal here is to do what with the conclusion?
Prove it.
Prove it. That's right. So if the conclusion says, hey, you either have to say this person was not a Baroque painter, or say that, yes, they were a Baroque painter, but this thing is not true. Mm-hmm. Baroque painting does not require displaying these random things. What must you think if you go down this path? If you think that he's a Baroque painter. Yeah, Julie?
He didn't include those things.
That he didn't include those things, because if you thought that he did include those things, then you wouldn't have to reject this definition, right? So here's one thing that I failed to talk about, I think, actually at all, when it comes to sufficient assumption questions, but that is this. Because the correct answer has to prove the conclusion, the argument almost always has only one problem, right? In other words, the test writers don't want to give you multiple problems with the argument, because if they give you multiple problems, then they'd have to write an answer choice that fixes all of them, right? The correct answer is now going to prove the conclusion. And so sufficient assumption questions are the type of question that you should proactively try to predict the answer. You should say, okay, wait, sufficient assumption, here's the conclusion, I got to prove it. Let me go find out what the problem is, because there's only going to be one, and then look for the answer that basically fills in that gap. Okay? And so here, since this stuff came out of nowhere, yet is part of the conclusion, we know the correct answer has to deal with that. And this is exactly what answer choice E says, right? E says, these things are not in this person's painting. So if you think this person was a Baroque painter, then you have to reject this definition, because this definition says, oh, if it's Baroque, then it's going to display these things, right? So that's why answer choice E is correct. Were we tempted by any other answers? Okay. All the other answers don't even address this stuff in the conclusion. I mean, one thing that you can do really quickly with sufficient assumption questions is just say, hey, look, if there's anything new in the conclusion, it's got to be addressed in the correct answer, because otherwise that element of the conclusion is going to remain unproven, right? Now, maybe they'll use a synonym or something like that, but at the end of the day, this just came out of nowhere.
Well, D was close, but I had usually.
Ah, yeah, as usually. It's like, great. Okay, what about in this instance? And that's a problem, right? Not sufficient. Excellent. Yeah, if you change D, a realistic painting always does not depict those things. I guess one question would be, was this person's paintings realistic?
Yeah, you have to assume realism means
They believed that his realism, I mean, it's not totally crazy. It sounds like his paintings were realistic, but there's something to be careful with, because with sufficient assumption, the conclusion's got to be proven. But I think if we had D and we got rid of the usually and we didn't have E, go with D. Okay, any other questions on this one? All right.